Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rarely Typical, a podcast where I'm talking about living with a rare disease, finding hope, and living a life that's rarely typical. My name is Jerry Langan, and I'm so excited that you guys are back. And today, I have another guest with me. You've already heard her this season, but my best friend Livia is here to chat about how you can support your friends with chronic illness. And we are going to talk about some of the things that I have gone through and some of the things that Livia has experienced in being my friend, and I have a chronic illness. So, hey, Liv.
Hey, Jerry. I am happy to be back and talking about one of my favorite things, which is being your friend.
I don't know how you can beat that introduction. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about how to support your friends that have chronic illness. And one of the questions that I get all the time is how do we support our loved ones with a chronic illness? And I think that loved ones encompasses friendship and also relationships and family. And today I want to touch on this topic because I know that there are not only patients that listen to this podcast and they're not only medical providers that listen to this podcast, but also caregivers and friends of people with chronic illness. Shout out to all my friends that I know are listening. I am so thankful to have a supportive group of people around me, but that has not always been my situation. That's not always been my reality. Is that I have definitely had people in my life that were more draining and did not show up for me. And, when you get diagnosed with a chronic illness, you look at your circle because you are in a place of vulnerability. You're in a place of complete lack of control. And you call your friends, you call your family, and you say, this is happening to me. And then you're just left to sit back and wait. So when I was diagnosed and I was in the hospital and I sent out that message to all my friends, I said, hey, I'm in the hospital. I just got diagnosed with this really scary thing. And my friends showed up. Some of them flew across the country like that day. Some of them dropped everything. Lots of them sent money. Lots of them sent gifts, any help that we needed. Lots of Uber Eats and DoorDash to my hospital room. And my friends that showed up made frozen dinners for me and Jason and the kids. They took care of the kids. We had friends that showed up just to take the boys so that Jason could spend time with me in the hospital. And they showed up. And that is super important when you are diagnosed with a chronic illness, especially because it's chronic and it's your whole life. And those people that show up are the ones that I feel like you should be pouring into and not only spending time with people who you have to pour into, but don't pour into you. So I was really thankful to have friends that showed up for me when I was diagnosed, but that's not only the part of my journey where people have showed up. Livia showed up when I was in Alabama and I was sick and I was in the hospital all the time. She showed up to take care of my kids. I had friends that showed up and alternated on who was taking care of the kids, people that would come help and clean my house. We've got a friend that lives here who we knew when we were in North Carolina and I had just had the boys, and she came and cleaned my house, did all of my laundry and all of these things when I was in the hospital taking care of my kids. And those are the kind of friends that show up. And those are the ones that you need long term, especially when you're dealing with a chronic illness that is your entire life and you never know when something's going to happen. And so having friends that show up is really important, but it's also friends that know how to show empathy towards you and can be there when you need them to be, and not just the physical, but also the emotional.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly. And so I think like showing up and having action is super important. And we've seen that come to fruition time and time again. And sometimes it's showing up too when you're not even like being asked. Because I think a lot of times as a friend, you're like, I don't know what you need, or you're wondering what to do. But sometimes you just have to go and do it. Like sometimes it would just be like, let's get out of the house, Jerry. Let's bring the kids here. Let's do this. Or I'll watch the boys. You go get a massage, whatever it is. But it's just taking that initiative and showing up and just doing the thing, or just dropping off dinner, whatever is helpful there. So I think action wise, we can take some liberties and just taking initiative and being there for our friends and meeting their needs without the invitation to do so all of the time. Because sometimes you don't know what you need or you're afraid to ask for help. Jerry and myself, I'm The pot calling the kettle black are both notoriously terrible at asking for help. Like, we will sooner go the extra mile before we say we need help. Having a friend that will rally and show up for you even when you don't ask, I think is so important. And I've seen that play out with your community in Florida. You never asked them to come with you on these monumental appointments that were really emotional and heavy, but they showed up. They did it. They did it anyway. And that is just a key point of being a friend and being a support for someone for the long haul with chronic illness. I think is just knowing when to take initiative, knowing when to show up and how to show up, and just knowing who your friend is. Do they have trouble asking for help? If they do, you might need to take a little bit more initiative there. So that was my thought with the action of just showing up. And in terms of communication and empathy, I think it's key to know the difference between empathy and sympathy. And Brene Brown does a great job of showing that in one of her videos. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and Google that. It's incredible. And it's just a helpful way to see empathy is really just, I see you and I feel you. You're connecting with something inside of yourself, even if it's not the same. I don't have a chronic illness, Jerry does, but I can connect to feelings of sadness and hopelessness within me and then meet her in that space and say, man, that's so hard. I can tell that you're feeling helpless in the situation. And that's not me bringing in any of my own stuff. I think oftentimes there's a temptation in that process of attempting to connect with ourselves to bring up our own experiences to try to connect with someone when it doesn't really land. I know that Jerry and I have had some funny conversations of just different ways. I think well-intentioned people tried to meet her in connecting with her in chronic illness. One of the ones that comes to mind that was funny was someone trying to connect with her saying, I know what it's like to go through chronic illness because I went through a divorce. And it's just not quite, you know? Because I think what happens in that moment when we try to connect something that doesn't quite land is the person is left feeling unseen. Like, you don't really understand me here. And so I think we have to be cautious with those moments of, oh, I know what chronic illness is like because I have had stomach problems my whole life. Not quite the same, not at all. And so rather than saying that, connecting to the feeling, the emotion inside of you, what did it feel like to walk through the divorce? There was grief, there was loss, there was hardship, there was pain. Connecting to those emotions and then saying, oh man, that's so hard. I know that must hold a lot of grief and pain rather than coming in with the, I know exactly what you're feeling like, and because I went through X. So not just assuming that we have all this information and connection based on our own trials that we've walked through to someone who has chronic illness. Because if you don't have a chronic illness, there's a lot of things we just don't know. So I think knowing what you don't know is a strength. And that's an invitation to ask questions.
Yeah, and when people try to connect with me, I do try to show a little grace because I can understand that the conversation is awkward, right? And I can understand that the conversation is probably not what they expect because usually if you don't know me that well, you don't know I'm probably just going to trauma dump on you because that's just how I have conversation. I like to have a very deep conversation. I don't like to have just small talk. That's just not my flavor. And so when you find yourself in a conversation with me and I'm trauma dumping on you about the stuff that I've dealt with, sometimes people find it really awkward and have no idea what to say. And so I understand that, right? I show a little grace because when people try to say, oh, I can connect with that, and then they give some rudimentary example that does not make any sense, I know that they don't mean it the way it comes across. But the way it does come across is that you are dismissing the gravity of the situation, or you are downplaying the severity of what I am dealing with something mundane that you were trying to compare it to. And that creates a sense of resentment for who you're talking to. And so if you were talking to somebody with a chronic illness and you were trying to compare something that doesn't compare, it makes them feel like you are downplaying how they are feeling and it makes them feel hurt. And it's not that your intention is that, it's just that is how the unnecessary comparison comes across, is that now you think that it's not that big of a deal, when somebody took the initiative and said, "Hey, like, I'm being vulnerable. This is something I'm really struggling with." And then you just brushed it off. Oh, everybody deals with that. And that's something Livia and I were talking about before we started this recording was people will compare my condition to, oh, at least you don't have cancer. But you guys got to see Sarah last season and talk about her cancer. And she said she would never trade places with me. And yes, I would probably also never trade places with Sarah, but Sarah is technically healed from cancer. And so the difference there is that she is healed and she is living a normal, healthy life. And yes, she's missing a leg, but I am dealing with something that I will have to deal with for the rest of my life. And there is a lot of weight and heaviness to that. And I think that when you compare two things that shouldn't be compared, it's really unnecessary. It's very apples to oranges.
In that Brene Brown video, she talks about that in terms of silver lining it. So saying at least it's not blank is a way to make the person who's trying to talk to the other feel better. When we're saying at least, it's not cancer or at least it's not XYZ, we're trying to make ourselves feel more comfortable because we're probably feeling a little uncomfortable with the emotion in the space. And so I think that's just a key thing to realize what people are doing when they respond in this way is I'm trying to make myself feel more comfortable in the situation because I'm feeling awkward or I'm feeling uncomfortable with your vulnerability or emotions. And so I'm trying to make that settle down for my own discomfort to go away. And I just think that's unfair. Like, I think we just have to get honest with ourselves and just realize if you are a friend, if you are a caregiver, if you're a spouse, if you're a parent of someone who has a chronic illness, we have to be able to grow our capacity to sit with uncomfortable emotions. We do, because we have to give the people we love space to feel and not have our own discomfort rise up and hinder that process. Because that's what we're doing when we jump in and we try to silver line, at least this, at least it didn't go this way, at least you're not on the transplant list, at least. That's unhelpful because that's dismissing all of their emotions that they just shared with you, all of the vulnerability they just shared. It's making them shut down and close off to you, which probably makes you feel a little more comfortable in the moment. But we just have to grow our capacity to sit with people in their feelings exactly where they're at, even if that's a hard space, and not be tempted to jump right into silver lining. Or I think another thing that I know that Jerry's experienced, and I think in general people experience, is advice giving. And I think advice giving can be a beautiful shared experience when someone has walked through a journey ahead of you and they're giving this wisdom and advice to you. I think that's a beautiful thing. But I think advice giving can get tricky when that's our response and it's a misguided response. Again, it's to promote and dismiss our own discomfort. We're trying to get the situation to settle down. As Jerry sharing her health journey with someone jumping in and saying, "Have you tried essential oil?" That's crazy. And that's real. That's a real story, you guys. That actually happened. Or, have you tried yoga? Jerry has a very competent medical team. I think she's okay. I don't know that essential oils or yoga will cure her chronic illness. I think it's a little crazy. But that again, it's from this well-intentioned place. I think people are trying to be kind. I don't assume the worst in others, but I do think the honest truth behind the action with silver lining and advice giving is because we are uncomfortable. And so we just have to grow our capacity to carry and be present with hard emotions. And what does that look like in response? I think it's just providing empathy or just holding space for them to feel those feelings, just being a good active listener, or asking questions that are genuine and curious, or even saying things like, "I don't even have the words to say anything right now. That is just so hard. Like, no words would suffice." I think there's power in that too. We don't always have to have the right thing to say. Just meeting someone in their pain and just being present and just being attuned to them and providing empathy is powerful, and it's connecting and it's honoring to the person who's sharing their heart and their struggles.
Yeah, and like advice giving is so interesting because obviously when you join a Facebook group for your disease or when you like are searching people on Instagram and you're looking for people that are dealing with the same journey as you. Yes, I'm always looking for advice. I'm always looking for advice on how to make my sites not hurt, how to make my sites feel better. And the diabetes community is amazing at coming and helping because they've been doing this for a lot longer than the people on SubQ have. And those types of advice are things that people are actually looking for. But when you start doing the same thing that you do when you are doing the at least thing, you're comparing advice that is unnecessary to a disease that is not easily fixed the way you want it to be. Those things can invalidate somebody and make them feel like you obviously think I am doing something wrong and it is something that I should be fixing. And I think that's the most hurtful part of having a chronic illness and having somebody come to you and say, maybe you should eat better. Maybe you should diet differently. Maybe you should try this supplement. Maybe you should do yoga. Maybe you should do all these things. And what it sounds like when I'm hearing it is that you think that I have done this to myself and that I'm not taking enough care of myself for me to have this diagnosis or me to be dealing with the stuff that I'm dealing with. And I know that might not be where you are coming from, but it is how somebody with a chronic illness perceives it. That you are saying, you must not have done these things. You must not have possibly tried this one suggestion that I have for you. And now, if you try this, maybe it'll help you. And really, it's one of those things where you can't help me if you don't know what I'm dealing with. And it goes back to the invalidation of feelings as well, right? All of those things are a compounded issue at the end of the day. Mostly what I feel like people with a chronic illness, what I'm looking for when I go to my friends or when I go to my husband is sometimes I'm just looking for somebody to say, yeah, that sucks. And to sit in that with me, like Livia was saying, I want somebody to sit there and just listen to me complain for a little bit because I'm a verbal processor. I want to process it out loud and I want to say, this really freaking sucks. And I want somebody to sit there and listen to me until I'm able to rationalize it in my own brain. And I think sometimes that is really what I'm looking for at the end of the day. I'm not really looking for advice and I'm not really looking for you to relate. I'm really just looking for a listening ear and somebody who can sit in that and feel empathy with me without having to feel sympathy or feeling like they need to fix it. And my husband is great at that. I'm so thankful that most of the time he just says, man, that really sucks. Sometimes I'm looking for a little more. Sometimes I'm looking for a little more verbal validation. That's why I call Livia because Livia is my verbal person. I do appreciate that Jason doesn't make me talk about things when I'm not ready. I appreciate that he lets me sit in my feelings. And when I'm ready to process it, he's ready to listen. He might not be a verbal processor himself, so he might not have advice for me, but sometimes I'm not looking for that. And that's really important to also remember. And then I think other ways that you can be helpful to your chronic illness friends or family is by doing what Livia said and taking the action and doing it without me having to ask. And a lot of the time, I will say no. If you ask, I will likely say no. My friends here are very aware of the way that I am and how I am. And so when they say, hey, do you want us to come get the boys? And I say no, they're like, okay, cool, we're on our way. And that is just something that I do find to be both funny and refreshing, I think, is that they take the initiative. And even if it's uncomfortable for me, because that makes me feel vulnerable, right? Like now you have identified that I am not feeling good. And it makes me feel vulnerable that you know that I'm not feeling good. And then you taking the action and doing it might put me in an uncomfortable place, but it does make me feel better by the time it's done. When they take the boys, I can just sit and I'm like, oh, wow, that was really nice. Or when they are like, hey, we're just going to drop something off, that makes me feel valued and appreciated. And even though it's such a small thing, the action without having to ask is the most important. It really drives me nuts when someone says, hey, how can I help you? Or let me know how I can help. Probably not going to let you know how you can help. Let's just be real. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to tell you how you can help. If you want to help me, you should probably take a little bit of initiative on your own and think of something that would be helpful. So one of my friends in Texas, he will see me post something and say, "Oh, I'm having a bad day." And the next thing I know, he says, "Hey, I just shot you $15 on DoorDash so that you can get lunch." And it's so nice and it's totally unnecessary, but he has always been super thoughtful. And he used to do that when I was in the hospital for no good reason. He would just see me post about it and say, "Hey, I think this will help," and never once ask me if I wanted it. He would just send it. And those are the moments that I really appreciate because somebody took initiative. And I feel like that is one way to both deepen a friendship, but to also give trust in a relationship is that I trust you to help me when I need it, when I don't even want to tell you that I need it, or when I don't even know that I need it, you know?
Yeah, because I think the reality is oftentimes we just don't know what we need and wouldn't even think to ask for it. So I love those examples of just showing up and just being there. And I also think there is an invitation. And again, I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to Jerry to sometimes take a risk and ask for what we need too. And Jerry's had to do that by necessity. When she went into the hospital, she had to say, I need someone to watch my kids. Someone had to watch the boys. But I think there are opportunities to just recognize when we do need help. Like, we don't always just have to do the hardest thing for the sake of doing the hardest thing. There are people who love us, and we are robbing people of an opportunity to serve us and be in our lives and have that connecting space if we never reach out and ask for help and we never ask for what we need. So I am preaching that to myself as much as I am to Jerry and anyone else who struggles with this. I just think sometimes we make life so much harder for no good reason, and resilience can take this self-reliant form where we're always just putting it on our own back and just gritting it out and just doing it when we have this community that desires and longs to come and rally alongside us through this. But we have to just have that discernment of who are our people. Do we have those people in our lives? And really looking at our friendships through this intentional lens of, are these people my people? Like Jerry's been talking about, are they the people that do these things or are they not? Do they have the capacity to sit with me in hard feelings? Do they show up for me when I need help? Do they meet me in those spaces? Do they encourage me in different ways? And encouragement doesn't always take the form of advice giving. In fact, I think it rarely does. I think encouragement in my relationship with Jerry has looked like just using our strengths to build one another up. I'm someone that has struggled with anxiety and fear much of my life, and Jerry is fiercely brave. And so, in the moments where I feel like I don't have a voice or I'm second guessing myself or I struggle to stand up for myself, I think of Jerry. I think of who she is and her voice and her lack of fear to advocate for herself. And she just encourages me to step into that. And I know that there are times when Jerry doesn't want to sit in her feelings and she wants to move past them and just keep going. And those are the times that I'll step in and I say, hey, let's linger here for a minute. What is going on underneath all of that? How are you feeling in the moment? And so she might hate that, but there are moments where just who we are builds each other up. So it's not this moment of we're trying actively to encourage one another in this super big way. It's just like this friendship that feels so edifying mutually. And so there's just an encouragement to look at your friendships and just take stock because being chronically ill is hard enough. I can imagine that is just enough of a daily challenge that to navigate unhealthy or toxic or disproportionate friendships is not something that you need to add to your plate. So really just seeking to find people who are those people for you, who show up for you, who can allow you to feel your feelings and who encourage you by just nature of who they are.
Yeah, and if you couldn't see me, I was going, "Nope," to the sitting in my feelings thing, and this morning I was listening to a podcast about joy in suffering and how we are told that we should have joy in our trials and how hard that is. One of the points that he made was he went around and said to people, "How would you say I need to improve?" Or what would you say you were praying that I would figure out this year? And one of the things that he said was that his friends said, "I just wish you would be more vulnerable. You ask a lot of really good questions. You are such a good listener. But then when it comes to sharing your own stuff, you shy away from that. And he said that it was so interesting because it was something that he really did try to do. And he just didn't realize that it wasn't coming across. And I identified with that a lot because I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions, a lot of very deep, thought provoking questions because Livia is my best friend. And that is just the way I communicate, I think. But then when it is turned around, I often will just say, I'm like, I'm good. I don't want to talk about it because that's just not something that I want to do. And having friends that you can feel vulnerable with, or being a person for your friend with a chronic illness where they can feel safe sharing things with you is very important. Antris and I talked about feeling safe with your doctor and being able to ask him specific questions and not feeling like he's going to judge you when you ask them a question. And that's the same thing with friendships. Like, I want to say something and not feel like I'm being judged for it. And I want to also be that kind of friend where when someone says something to me, my first reaction is not to jump to judgment. And that can be really hard as humans, essentially, right? And a lot of the time, I will just smile and I will say, yeah, let me pray for you. And sometimes it can be an empty allocate, right? People say, oh, I'll pray for you, or oh, I'm thinking of you, or I'm sending positive vibes or whatever. And I get that those are meant to be helpful, but sometimes it's the inaction of those things that I feel come up pretty empty. And so when you say that you're going to pray for someone, I really hope that you do pray for them. And when I say I'm going to pray for you, which I don't say a lot, I really will pray for you. I really will sit and have a moment where I am actually speaking to Jesus about you. And I feel like there's so much power in that and knowing that there is somebody out there that is advocating for you in a room that you're not in. And that is just friendship, right? Being there and being able to help them advocate for themselves, even if they don't even realize that you're doing it. And if you're looking to be supportive for your friends, just do the things that you say you're going to do. Pray for them if you're going to pray for them. Show up when you say you're going to show up. Don't beat around the bush. Livia and I talk about this all the time. I hate it when someone says, hey, let's catch lunch. And then you make plans and then they don't show up. Or I hate it when someone says, hey, let's do this. And then the day of they cancel. And I don't have the time nor the capacity to sit and beg you to hang out. I am exhausted. I have all these other things going on. So just show up when you say you're going to show up. Do the things that you say you're going to do. It's not very hard to be a good friend. And if you find yourself listening to this episode and going, oh, those are things that I need to work on, that's awesome. Work on those things. I encourage you to take a look at yourself and say, if I'm not doing these things the way that I want to be doing them, maybe you should take a minute and just say, I need to work on myself before I can be a good friend to you. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I was just yes and amening that whole presentation from vulnerability, the very beginning. Vulnerability is so key and it's risky. It really is. And I think just that challenge to be more vulnerable and like share part of our hearts, that can be a scary and hard thing to do. And I think you have to have trust. And I don't know that you give your vulnerability to everyone. I think that's an unhealthy thing to do also. I think you have to build up trust with people. And there's a term called perceptive trust that I've come across. And it's I trust you to the degree that I perceive you as trustworthy. So not everyone gets my trust all the time. That would be negligent. But I will take a risk with you. I'll give you a little bit of my vulnerability. I'll dip my toe in that water. And if you respond with grace and kindness, then I'm going to dip my toe in a little bit deeper. I'm going to maybe put my whole foot in with you. And if that goes well, then okay, I'm going to put my whole leg in now. Like I'm going to proceed forward to the degree I perceive you trustworthy. But if I am vulnerable with you and then I receive judgment or advice or silver lining or all the other problematic ways we talked about earlier in the podcast, then I'm probably not going to take more steps forward with you because I don't have that trust. So I think vulnerability is always a challenging place and always a place that I think everyone can grow in. But I think it's framing it in terms of not everyone gets all of us, and having discernment and wisdom with who we share our things with. Because not everyone has capacity to be that person. They just don't. And as Jerry was saying, okay, if you're hearing this and you're saying, oh, that's me, or oh, I have stuff to work on, then just acknowledging that can be true. Not everyone can hold all of our stuff. So just being aware of who has that capacity, taking these small measured risks with people and proceeding forward with that perceptive trust, I think is really important. And I think this is why Jerry and I are such good friends, is because we both are the people that will do what we say we're going to do. Let our yes be yes, let our no be no. So I think having boundaries is also important, especially when you have a chronic illness, like, and your energy is depleted and you're already navigating so much. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then as a friend, let that be true of me too. Having boundaries and being able to say, I'm exhausted, I'm tapped out, and saying no to things when you have to, that's okay. That's good. That is generous. I would prefer that over someone saying yes and then having to dip out because they actually meant no. I think just doing what we say we're going to do, but also just giving ourselves permission. I saw a reel the other day of Gabby Wendy, a reality star, saying that she's a no girl, not a yes girl. There was some language, but I just edited it a little bit. But I'm like, yes, I think we're in an era where a lot of people are yes people. We just want to say yes and we just want to people please and we want to appease. I think there is permission to say no. And I think you need people in your life that support that no. I know that Jerry and myself, we love a good time. We love to say yes. We love to do things and hang out with people. But I know if Jerry's saying, no, I can't, I don't have capacity, that is one, really hard for her to do. And two, I'm going to let her know be no. And I'm going to honor that and bless that and encourage that. And so I think just having friends that support you in that space, that help you with that boundary setting, especially if that's something that's hard for you to navigate, is important. And I think you have permission to be a no queen. You go for it.
Honestly, I say no a lot. And it's only because I love saying no. I love sitting at home and reading my book. Now you can see why Livia and I are such good friends. It's because this is how our conversations go almost all the time. We just bounce back and forth. We could do this forever. So if you've made it this far, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate that you are listening to this podcast. I appreciate that you have asked me for advice. And I'm also aware that I'm not always the smartest person in the room. And I asked Livia to come onto this with me so that she could also share what it looks like from an outside perspective. And I'm thankful for friends that will come on here and talk about me and talk about our friendship and share real things and how they have perceived my journey and also the way I operate, just so that you guys know that I'm not just full of shit all the time. I just want you guys to know that there are friends out there that can be like this and that there are people that can show up for you, and that if you don't have those people and if you're looking for those people, then that's okay. You keep persevering and find those people because they're out there, I promise. And if you are the friend that is listening to this podcast, I hope you took something important away from this. I hope that you realize that the action of showing up is really important, and the allowing people to be vulnerable in their space is important, and the building of trust is super important. And those are the things we want to leave you with today. I don't know if Livia has anything else she wants to say, but if she does, I'm going to let her do that right now.
I would just say to you that it might be scary or intimidating to be a friend or a spouse or a parent that's coming into this world of navigating a chronic illness from this perspective, from a community perspective. When I started to be friends with Jerry at first, I had no idea. I had no idea she had a chronic illness. And then we connected more, and through questions and just connection, it did come up. Obviously, I noticed she was wearing a pump. So there was just curiosity that came out, and we had that connecting space. And I just think it's been a gift in so many ways to just navigate this with her, because I think it's just been this beautiful perspective that I've gotten to borrow from her in terms of how she lives life, and just living life in a full way and not taking time for granted, and just seeing the world through her eyes. Like, she's just really allowed me to do that and just be present with her and yeah, all of life's ups and downs and just having the perspective that life is forever and we take it for granted so often. So just living life to the fullness and really just embracing every day as the gift that it is. And so it has been, I would say, way more of a blessing in my life just to navigate this chronic illness just as a friend and a support to her. I think it has just given me that gift of perspective that I wouldn't have if it wasn't for walking with her through life. So it's been the best. Love you, Jerry.
Okay, so if you guys are still here, I'm so thankful for you. If you liked this episode, like it, follow it, and we will catch you next time.